There are many ways to manipulate objects in Blender 3D, and I'd like to show you the most useful one, which is not to be found in any menu per se. What everybody who uses Blender does is they have one hand on their mouse and one on their keyboard, so you're using your keyboard to trigger manipulation events. What I can do is look around, and on my keyboard keep watching this area below here, so you will see what I type on my keyboard. I will type the letter G to grab the cube and move it around, and I can hit escape to stop moving it around. Now this is maybe a little bit hard to remember, so my top tip is look at the object tools on the left. This is a menu with buttons that do pretty much the same thing as what you can do with your keyboard. I can hit translate and instantly the cube is attached to my mouse and I can move it around. The reason I don't want to use these is because I have to move my mouse all the way over there all the time, and if I want to move this cube to the left now, I get stuck on the edge of my screen, which isn't nice. Same with scaling. If I hit scale, it's very easy to make my cube smaller, but I can't make it bigger because I can't move out of my screen. So the position of these isn't too handy. What we can do, however, is go there and hover our mouse over the button, and it will tell you the shortcut for scaling is the letter S. You can see it in the little tooltip that comes up. So I can go anywhere in the 3D view, hit the letter S, and instantly the cube is attached to my cursor and I can move it around. You do have to remember to have your cursor in the 3D view. If I have it, for instance, over the properties panel and I hit S, nothing at all happens. This is basically how you want to manipulate things in Blender 3D. Just have your mouse wherever you want, hit R for rotate, S for scale, and G to grab your object and move it around. To find all of these, you can look in the object tools on the left, or there are even more that you may not use as often. Look in the object menu at the bottom of the 3D view. This has a very long list with sublists even, with all the functions you need to manipulate your objects. So now we can look around a bit and we can move our cube around as well. Maybe you want to add a second cube or a third cube. There is a duplicate objects function, which is very useful. It's also Shift D, that's the shortcut key, so we can do Shift D and instantly the cube is attached to my mouse and I can move it somewhere else and click to confirm. So I can do Shift D to add a whole bunch of cubes. This is really the way that a lot of people do it. There we go. Nice, and he's got a little tooth there as well. So we have a smiley face-ish made of cubes. You don't always just want a cube, of course, so the other way to add more objects to your scene is through the Add menu at the top here. Here we have all sorts of things that you can add, for instance new cameras and lamps in case you want to light your scene and render an animation. But the one that we use most of all is the meshes. A mesh is the generic name for a shape in Blender 3D because it consists of a sort of a weave of points connected by edges and surfaces. We have a bunch of default ones. For instance, let's add a new shape, a UV sphere. Now, there is a chance that you're trying to do this and it appears in a spot where you don't expect. The chances are that is where you have put this thing by clicking on the other mouse button, because with one mouse button you select, by default that's the right mouse button. By clicking on the left mouse button you move this little 3D cursor, that's what we call it, to that position. When you're just starting out in Blender it doesn't look quite useful, but it really is. You can do things relative to that point in space. The other thing that happens is if I put it here and I add a new monkey, that monkey appears where the 3D cursor is. And we can click on the left mouse button, in my case the right mouse button, because I changed it, to move the 3D cursor to a new position. That is adding new objects and duplicating old ones. Now we've made a bit of a mess of this Blender 3D file. Let's say I want to clean it up, and by doing so I will show you what I talked about in the previous lesson, which is the relevance of your view. For instance, let's say I have this cube and I'm just looking for some random angle, and I want to move this cube to exactly where that cube is. I will clean up a bit of the cubes around by hitting delete. I'll select and delete, so we have a bit of a clear view. This cube, move it to that cube, and I'll do it by eye, just by looking at it. So I G, grab it, move it to where the other one is, and it looks like it's pretty close to where the other one is, except if I look from another angle, you can see it is not where the other cube is at all. It did look that way from this angle, roughly, but from here it doesn't. That is because you always move a cube in the plane of your view, or perpendicular to the plane. That's a little bit complicated, but there is a trick to work around it as long as you want to work a little bit consistently. If I want to move this cube to the other one, what you want to do is go to the front view, which is numpad 1, so everything is flat. If it isn't flat, you're probably looking in perspective mode like I am now, which you can switch to with numpad 5. I'll hit 5 again and everything becomes flat. I can now move it to the other cube. It looks pretty good, but it still isn't if we're looking around, but I moved it correctly from the front. Now I go to the side view with numpad 3 and move it again. And after doing this, you can see they're in exactly the right position. This is the big trick to keep in mind whenever you want to move something to a specific location. If you do it first, I'll do it again with one of these, from the front view, move it to another cube, then to the side view, move it again, and it should always work. It's not always front and side that really work, that provide you with a clear view. You can also do side and top, or top and front, or behind. All you have to do is from a specific straight view and from another one at 90-degree angle from the original. Then you can perfectly control where your objects go. There are some ways in which we can get a slightly more advanced control over the manipulation of our objects. What you want to look at is the left corner of the screen. If I, for instance, scale this cube, you can see here in the left corner the value of how much we are scaling it. This updates live as I move the mouse. So we can see the number. But if I have a specific number in mind, what I can also do whilst I'm still moving this mouse around and I'm still manipulating it, for instance, if I want it to be twice as big as it was, I can just type the number 2 on my keyboard. And already it is locked in place. My mouse movement no longer matters because I typed in a value. I can now also change it to 2.5 if I want and keep typing numbers behind it. If I change my mind, I can backspace until it reattaches to here. So I can type 2 and hit enter, and I've scaled my object to twice its original size. Another thing that we can do whilst I'm scaling is I can type the letter of the axis I want to scale it in. So right now I'm scaling in all axes, in X, Y and Z, but if I want to make a bar, for instance, I can hit X and I'm scaling only in the X axis. Now I can still type the value, so I can make it twice as big in the X axis alone. And I can change my mind as well. I'm still in the manipulation. I can type Y and have now switched to the Y axis. I can make it 20 as well by typing a 0, or backspace to go all the way back to, oh, I'm still locked to the global Y. I can hit Y again to get rid of that one and get all axes. This way I can make it very simple to change the shape of my cube. This is very, very basic, so we can change it all by hand. The other thing you want to keep in mind is on the right here in the properties panel, you may have noticed all these values changing. This is the location of the object I have selected. That is this one, its rotation and its scale. The scale is a factor. So this one has a scale of 2. I can also change it here by either dragging on the input, or I can enter the number that I want to have. Now that you can, in a very simple way, move around cubes and change their shapes, I would recommend you go to the internet and look up the Blender 10 Cubes Challenge. This is a really, really nice little competition. I don't think it's still running, but it's been done in the past. Basically what it does is challenge you to make something interesting out of just 10 cubes. There's a lot of images online that will show you some inspiration, and it's really nice practice to get to grips with Blender's interface.